Hello, I'm Citrus, and you're looking at the perfect grade RX-78-2 Gundam. This came out in 1998, and it retails for 12,000 yen. Here's a size comparison with a Gundam marker. As you can see, it's about twice the height. Since I went through each section of the Gundam in depth in the build series, this video will basically be just an overall impression of the entire finished kit. But, just to refresh your memory, I will go over all the big gimmicks and accessories, which I'll get out of the way first since there's not too much to say about them. Get the core fighter here, which transforms really neatly, although it is a little bit awkwardly proportioned. Have the big shield, which is mostly featureless because the manual doesn't include any decals for you to put on it. Have your handle, which is typical on all of these shields. A door for the sight. A beam rifle with swiveling scope. Handle. And 2 beam sabers. And that's basically it. The bazookas are included in an upgrade set, then the Perfect Grade RX-78-2 Gundam option set number 2 that actually came out some 5 months after this in April of 1999. So at the time this kit was released, you actually could not get a bazooka with this. This kit, to my knowledge, is still being printed, but the option sets, as you can imagine, are no longer available. Because of that, unless you do a lot of digging, you're probably not going to be able to find them very easily. There's nothing too special in terms of the articulation. You have a ball-jointed head, arm can swing out about that far, a little backwards and forwards, swivel at the top of the shoulder, a 100-degree bend, 180 in the elbow, ball-jointed wrist, same deal at the hips, 180 in the knee, and some sideways and back and forth in the ankle. Now there are basically 3 weak points in the articulation in general. So there is a waist joint, but as I mentioned in the torso section, there's actually almost no motion in it. And it does give the kit a lot of stability, but it doesn't make it very dynamic. The second point is the hips. So this is as far as the leg can turn inwards, and this is as far as the leg can turn outwards. And insofar as coming up, that's as far as it goes, even though the joint itself can do a lot more. The particular way that the piece is shaped doesn't allow the leg to bend it up any more than this, realistically. And the third weak point is the ankles, because it only tilts about that much. So you're not going to be able to get any really dynamic, wide-legged poses out of this thing, but it should be able to look good in a couple of crouching poses or anything like that. And insofar as gimmicks, there's 2 big ones. The first one that we know most perfect grades have nowadays, and even some master grades, is the light up eyes. So you open it up, there's a switch in the back, you slide it down, and there you go. LED is very bright, but changing the battery requires you basically take apart the entire head because there's a screw that locks in the battery tray right in here. So you have to take off this whole piece. And the next, which this is part of, the little side pits, is the open hatch gimmick, which all the kits back then were, huge on this. And I won't run through all of them, but there's basically the chest here, the arm, the biceps here, one here. This hatch on front can technically open if you count that. The pockets on the skirt, and 1, 2, 3, 4 panels on the leg. So once I get them all opened up, here's the Gundam in its full hatch open mode, as some call it. And as you can see, there is a good bit of detail exposed all over the entire kit. Although to really take full advantage of this effect, you would need to paint the entire inner frame underneath, basically. There's a lot of good pistony detail, but given the dark plastic color of the inner frame, you can't really see it too much if it's not picked out with a bit of metallic color here and there. Now, that's easier said than done, of course, because, as I mentioned in the build series, the parts separation on the inner frame isn't very good. So you'll need either a steady hand or a lot of masking to get all the colors in the right places. Here's the final spin with basically the best pose that I could get this giant thing into. And I was posing this, I found out that you can't actually get this to crouch because up here in the hips there isn't enough clearance for the leg to rise high enough to balance out the leg that's down, so it can't really get down on one knee very evenly. And it's also in poses like this where the lack of articulation in the ankles really show, where it's a huge challenge to get the legs out and the feet flat in even the most basic of dynamic poses. In general, I would say the one thing that you need to be able to thoroughly enjoy this kit is probably patience. There's a lot of big parts, which would make the build process seem it's a lot simpler. But if you really want to pick out all of the details, trim down all of the decals so that they all fit properly, it really does take quite a lot of time. And the thing is, while you're building it, a lot of the mechanisms don't seem all of that impressive. I mean, we have modern master grades now that have all of these things done with fewer parts for basically the same effect, and so basically you're cutting out a bunch of tiny pieces to do essentially what fewer pieces can do nowadays. But the finished overall piece is still nonetheless very impressive. In terms of technology, it's probably, compared to modern kits, more like a big master grade rather than a real perfect grade. But you have to understand that, given this kit's age, this is almost 20 years old now, this is basically the genesis of all of the technology that we have nowadays. I mean, the LEDs, pistons, shifting armor panels, even open hatch gimmicks that we've seen on master grades like the 1.0 or the 1.5 and the 1-year war version all came from this. This is basically, essentially, the origin of Gunpla as we know it today. That said, it really isn't for everyone. If you're a fan of, posing your kits, playing with them, displaying them, and, having a lot of visual details and stuff like that, this is probably not for you. Because the amount of work, first of all, that you would have to do to this in order to give it all of the details that you would see on just something like Kotoki Master Grade or, just panel lines, would take a huge amount of time. Lots of big pieces, you gotta make sure they're all straight. And when you have a lot of big surfaces, you really have to take your time because the little details will show. It's also rather big and rather unwieldy to pose. It does not to say this is a complete brick, but to be able to get into a really good sort of display, it does take a lot of effort. On the other hand, if you love, just diving into one of these big kits, spending forever on it, making it look the best it absolutely can, and you're a huge fan of, opening hatch gimmicks and stuff like that, then this is definitely something to try picking up. In any case, you won't have to spend too much, because even though the box says 12,000 yen, you can easily find this from second-hand sites for anywhere from 7,000 to 8,000 yen. I got mine for about 7,000 from Mandrake, and at the current exchange rate, that's something like $60 to $70. And that little for something this big, this massive, and this important to Gunpla history, I think that's an absolute steal. So that's all for this review. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Mr. Robot